Welcome to everyone who is joining in. I know it takes a few minutes, so some of you probably have already heard me, and some of you haven't, but welcome everyone. We are going to get started in just a few minutes to give folks a little bit of a grace period. So thank you for joining us. See some folks who are joining in. We'll get started in about 1 minute to let folks get in and get settled. Well, welcome everyone. We will go ahead and get started, though I imagine some folks might be joining us a little bit later. I am Emily Carson. I am the head of school at Harlem Hebrew. Many of you know me, and for those of you whom I have not yet met, I can't wait to do so, and especially if you are one of our new families, I'm also really excited to just meet your whole family and welcome your child to our school. I'm really, really grateful to be here with all of you, and I appreciate that you have taken the time out of your evening to be with us. And I am excited to get to share where we are at in our planning for your children. And we do have a lot to share, and I know many of you probably already have a lot of questions. So I just want to go ahead and flag the chat functioning is working. When you send a question, it will go to all of the panelists, whom I will introduce in just a moment. And we will make sure at the end that we have space for those questions and that everyone gets their questions answered. Before we go ahead and dive in, and I really want to introduce someone very special to the Harlem Hebrew community, Stephanie Branavan. Many of you know her already. She'll be speaking a lot more later. Stephanie, if you could just wave for everybody. Stephanie is our assistant head of school this year. She is new in her role as assistant head of school, and she has been hard at work in this role for all summer helping us prepare, and she has spent the last 2 years in our community as the academic dean of literacy and many years in education and teaching before that. And so I'm excited for you all to hear from her a little bit later and for you all to get to know her as well. And so if we could just put our agenda up there one more time. We have a pretty straightforward agenda for our time together today. We really want to get the most out of our updated reopening plan and get into specifics of what you and your child can expect when we return to school, and address some of the questions that we've already received, as well as those that will probably come up during this presentation this evening. In offering your child a choice of program model, we are encouraging you to really do what you think is best for your family and child. Some households have particular challenges in keeping their children at home. Others face greater risks of sending their children to school due to the health of one or more household members. We really do truly understand how difficult this decision can be. And we hope our goal tonight is really just to provide you with the information you need in order to consider that decision and chart a path forward for you and your family and your child. And so to help us do that tonight, in addition to myself and Stephanie, we have some important members of the Hebrew Public Charter Network with us tonight. We have John Rosenberg, our CEO, Emily Fernandez, our Chief Schools Officer, and Jonathan Worley, our Chief Operating Officer. And now I am going to turn it over to our CEO, John Rosenberg, to get us started. John, I will pass it off.
Thank you, Emily, and good evening, everyone. I know we have about 58 folks currently on the call with us. Some of you are probably attending by phone, some of you by video. I also just want to make clear, we've got an hour tonight for our presentation. As with last month's town hall, if we don't get to one of your questions that you post in chat, or if you're attending by phone and aren't able to submit a question using the chat function, we will respond to you following the meeting, either in a follow-up memo or frequently asked questions document, or with an email directly to you if you give us your email address. You can always email questions directly to us at info@hebrewpublic.org. The slide that's up on your screen, for those of you who are looking on video, I'm not going to spend much time on it at all. Just want to make sure that we're all grounded in what Hebrew Public and the schools that it supports, including Harlem Hebrew, are about in terms of leading a national movement of exceptional, diverse public charter schools that teach modern Hebrew to children of all backgrounds and prepare them to be successful global citizens. And that we're really, really focused in this moment of great complexity on our Olam values that we've shared before with you and will continue to reiterate. Next slide, please. Everyone who's following the news right now knows that there's a lot of controversy around the question of school reopening in different states around the United States, in different countries. I do want to make sure that we're all focused a little bit on what the local context is in New York State compared to much of the rest of the country. So on the slide here, and again, for those who are on phone, New York is not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination, but is doing significantly better, along with New Jersey, New England, and a few other states, in its efforts to contain the coronavirus. In terms of the percentage of tests in a given day that come back positive, meaning come back where someone is tested positive for the coronavirus, our positive test rate is a small fraction in New York of that in states like Georgia, California, Florida, Nevada, and others. Most of the stories the news stories about schools reopening and seeing significant numbers of infections are in states in the South or in the West or in locations that are really struggling right now to contain the coronavirus. That does not mean that opening does not bring risk. However, the governor of New York, Governor Cuomo, has stated in a press conference last Friday that schools are permitted to reopen. And we believe that reopening is the responsible thing to do based on the available data and based on what the state and the city are allowing us to do. Again, as Emily Carson said, and I want to reiterate, we believe that parents should be able to exercise choice about whether returning to school in person is the right thing for their child to do. But we've made the decision, as have most of the schools in New York, that at the appropriate time, we will reopen in person with the appropriate health and safety measures in place that, as you'll hear later tonight, will create a lot of important limitations and restrictions on the way we serve your children. Next slide, please. So a little bit of context then about what that's going to mean in terms of what we think the timeline will be. Last night, we sent to all of you, and if you didn't get this email, please let us know as soon as possible at info@hebrewpublic.org or contact the Harlem Hebrew team directly. But we sent an email with a very lengthy description of what we're going to be doing. And part of me wants to apologize for the length of it, but we had a lot of information to give you, some of which we will also try to summarize for you tonight about the different options that are available. so that you can make a more fully informed decision, again, about what's right for your child. You have a few days to make that decision until August 17th, which is next Monday, to fill out the form, to which there are links in the email and in the memo. And if you click on those, it will take you to a very simple form to fill out where you select for your child or each of your children, if you have more than one attending our school, between the fully remote option and the hybrid learning model. The first day of school will be September 8th, same as the city schools have announced, which is the day after Labor Day. It's a Tuesday. But the first 2 weeks, and this is critical for everyone to understand and be ready for, the first full 2 weeks of school are going to be entirely remote. And again, we'll talk more about what that means in terms of, but it will enable the school staff to ensure, along with the Hebrew Public team, that every family is up and running with technology and internet access, has met their teachers, and have begun to learn the different procedures that are going to be involved both in remote learning and during in-person instruction. Our current plan is for those families that select the hybrid learning model, the model where your children come into school for part of the week, is that will begin the week of September 21st, which would mean Monday, Tuesday for some children that week, Thursday, Friday for others, and as you'll hear again in a bit, for kindergartners, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. That's the current plan, and it's very important that we all understand that we don't have full control over what happens in terms of the health conditions on the ground and the decisions of government. There are things that could happen between now and then that say to us, not responsible to open in person. And if that happens, we will give you as much advance notice as we can. But right now, our plan, our hope, our belief, we think the significant probability is that the week of September 21st will start in person. Okay, back to you. So I'm going to hand it over now to Emily Fernandez, our Chief Schools Officer, who will tell you a little bit about what the academic plan is with respect to options for your child.
Great. And thank you, John, for just grounding us in this current context. Good evening, everyone. My name is Emily Fernandez. I am the Chief Schools Officer. I work very closely with the heads of school at each of our schools, including Miss Emily here at Harlem. And then I work to design the academic and long-term vision for the network. I'm going to walk us through what this actually looks like in terms of academic programming, scheduling for your child. Should you choose to engage in the hybrid model where you're in school 2 days a week and out of school 3 days a week, still getting instruction, or whether you choose the 100% fully remote model. And we'll go over both of those in this next section. So I'm going to start with the hybrid learning model. This graphic, if you were here with us in July for the town hall, should look familiar, but I'm going to take us through it once again. So if you choose hybrid learning, that means you're going to have a hybrid or blended model of in school, in the building learning, and out of the school building, at home remote learning. We'll take the red cohort, for example, cohort A. They will be in person in the school building Monday and Tuesday. They'll have a full day of instruction with their teachers, engaging with their peers, following very strict health and safety protocols, which my colleague Jonathan Worley, our Chief Operating Officer, will go into greater detail about later on in the presentation. And then they will go home for the next 3 days. Wednesday will be remote, Thursday will be remote, Friday will be remote. Thursday and Friday, we're going to have a pretty robust schedule of both some live Zoom instruction, similar to what we had this spring, and also a significant amount of asynchronous assignments and platform engagement, all of which is connected to the work that they're doing in school. Wednesday as well will function as a remote day for this cohort with some live instruction and some asynchronous instruction. It is a slightly different schedule because on that day, there are no students in the school building. And although teachers will be providing some live instruction in the morning, they will also be doing some of the preparation, videotaping, and overall logistical management that's going to allow these two tracks of school to happen at the same time. So again, if you're in cohort A, you're in school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday through Friday, remote. And if you're in cohort B, our blue graphic here, Monday, Tuesday at home, and then you come in, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at home, and you come into the school building for live in-person instruction on Thursday, Friday. Can we go to the next slide? A little bit more about the in-person days. For this group of students, again, this is for families who opt into the hybrid in-person and remote model. In-person days, some of this again will look familiar. It'll be in small groups. So no more than 15 students, and in many cases less than that per classroom. Individual desks, we won't be in pods. Limited interactions between classrooms. So we're not all going to go to the cafeteria to have lunch. We're going to eat lunch in the classroom. We're not all going to be in the hallway at the same time, multiple classrooms, because it would decrease the effectiveness of podding and we would be cross-contaminating, right? Slightly school hours, and I do want to emphasize this slightly. You'll see exactly what that looks like in this next section. But we're going to use that to account for, one, a safe, socially distant arrival and dismissal, so that we make sure we're not crowding our doors and our spaces and putting kids and families at risk. And we need our school staff to do some remote support for our students who are at home those days, and so that's going to be accounted for it. As you'll see in every aspect of our model, all special education, multi-language learner supports are going to be implemented and monitored. This is a key factor, no matter if you're in the hybrid model, fully remote, or in person or remote. We just want to emphasize that across the board. So, going to take us to remote learning days. These are the days when your kids are at home if you're in the hybrid model. In these days, there will be some live synchronous real-time instruction. There will also be significant asynchronous instruction. And so this is where students are following a schedule, doing independent work, using certain learning platforms. We're going to talk a bit about those: Amplify, Epic, Zern, all platforms that directly connect and complement with our in-person curricula. And there will be individual and family support. So we know that this is new to everyone. We're looking at what family workshops we can provide, how we can check in on kids and families individually. Again, as I said, you'll see this throughout. Special education and multi-language learner supports are going to be in place, thoroughly monitored. We've been working closely with the CSE, our Center for Special Education, through the DOE, to make sure that our plans are vetted, and we're going to be implementing those throughout. The last bullet I'll just emphasize here briefly is that we are going to make sure that every family has access to whatever tech support they need, be it technology. So we're going to make sure that every student has a laptop that is safe, or an iPad for our younger grades that is safe and ready to engage, and also that internet access, if it prevents a barrier, we're going to provide supports to work around that. So that's a bit on the operations side, but it functions in our programming. We could not do this programming well for kids and families without that. So we just want to emphasize that here. All right, I'm going to hand it over to our school leadership, Miss Stephanie here, to take us a bit through the concrete day-to-day schedules of what this would be like for a child at Harlem Hebrew. Stephanie?
Stephanie is actually going to share a little bit more when we get to middle school. So I will jump in and just share more about what the elementary school experience is gonna look like, sort of a day in the life of one of our younger students that are part of our hybrid learning cohort. And we're going to start by sharing what their in-person live instruction day is going to look like. So our doors are going to open at 8:45. Remember that it is delayed because prior to that, our teachers are going to be providing live synchronous instruction to our remote students. So our teachers are really doing a pretty hefty lift there, and that's why our delay is there. Our students and families would follow our arrival health and safety procedures, including temperature checks, symptom forms, staggered, and socially distanced entry. Students would have the opportunity to eat breakfast in their classrooms while likely participating in an academic review or activities while their peers arrived over the course of that 45 minutes. We know 45 minutes is a long time for kids just to be sitting and eating. So we want to make sure that there's something meaningful and academic happening there. After that time period, the kids would start their day with a socially distant morning meeting. Morning meeting is a really important part of our day. It's where we really work to build strong classroom culture and community. Typically, this happens by sitting in a circle on the rug, and kids are quite close. Morning meeting is still really important to us. Building culture and community, frankly, is probably even more important now than it ever was before. And we're going to make sure that still happens, but it is going to look a little bit different because our students will be likely standing and they will be 6 feet apart from each other. So it will be a much bigger circle and not sitting on the rugs together. After that, our students will move into their academic content. For our returning families, you will notice that much of this curricula looks really familiar. We worked to keep what was strong about our program and improve our implementation while also incorporating, complementary learning technology that would best maximize this specific moment in time with this need for hybrid learning. So for our math program, Eureka, which we think is a really great math program, we're going to be partnering it with Zern in the younger grades and IXL in our highest grades. And for our literacy program, we are keeping those core components, and we know that really make a difference in our growing learners. And we're going to continue to have foundations, guided reading, readers workshop, writers workshop. So really help our kids be strong readers. And we are all going to take all of those and we're going to partner them with Amplify. And by incorporating these complementary learning platforms into our in-person day, we hope to make the transition between the in-person and remote learning feel very seamless for our students. Excuse me. So that brings us to shifting our gears a bit to talking about what an at-home day looks like for this very same student. They're going to start their day with their very same teacher who teaches them in person on in-school days, leading them through a live remote morning meeting and also a daily preview of their schedules and assignments. We believe that this is going to be a really, really crucial part to maintaining consistency for our students and setting up both our students and also our families and the adults supporting our students for success on remote learning days. It also allows our students to maintain community with their peers, even when they are not building them. I cannot say enough the importance of really building strong community and how important that is to us, and having that consistency and continuity for our kids from our remote learning days to our in-person days. So after that piece, our kids are going to move into a full schedule with a combination of pre-recorded video lessons, online learning platforms, and independent work. You probably are noting that many of the same curriculum components that you saw in the in-school day are present here, although in slightly different structures. We believe that if students are really familiar with those components in all settings, they're going to be most successful in their at-home learning days, in managing the programs, learning the platforms. It's not going to feel something brand new. It's going to set up our kids for success. And for our families who have been doing remote learning, we also hope to set up you all for success. And so that's a lesson that we learned, and we really want to be supportive there. One significant difference in our in-school and at-home learning schedules is the break and longer lunches built into the schedule for our at-home kiddos. While we know that extended screen time is challenging for any age, we are very much particularly concerned about our youngest learners, and we want to really build in those intentional breaks for students and for families. And so with that, I'm going to sort of pause there. I just shared a lot of information, and I'm going to transition it over to Stephanie, who's going to share with us about what this middle school experience, so grades 5 through 8, what that will look like.
Like Emily said before, hi everyone, my name is Stephanie Branavan and I'm the assistant head of school. I'm going to walk you through, similar to how Emily did, I'm going to walk you through the schedule both for in-person middle schoolers and for what the remote middle school day will look like. So as you see, similar to the lower school, the school day will start with a staggered arrival between 8:45 and 9:30. After that, students will have advisory to start their day from 9:30 to 10. Similarly, to start their day just in a really positive way, and really helps us build strong community, especially for our middle schoolers. As we look through the rest of the day, for those of you who are returning families, you'll notice that the things that you see here are the core curricular components that we've had last year, that we've had years in the past. So students will transition through close reading, expeditionary learning, which is our English curriculum, math, social studies, and science. The other thing you'll note, and this is slightly different, and I think we'll speak to this a little bit more in some of the safety concerns, unlike in previous years, students will not be transitioning between their different classes, but rather teachers will be coming to them just to make sure that there is as little travel between the classes as possible. I would say again that we really try to prioritize having these opportunities for key content in school instruction and really giving students an opportunity to get as much like contact time with their teachers and really set them up to be successful for when they are at home and when they are working remotely. On this next slide, and also similar to our lower school schedule, you'll see our at-home schedule for middle schoolers. It follows a lot of the same structure. Students will have close reading, social studies, math, science, expeditionary learning. We'll also have specials and science as well. We're going to be using a mix of synchronous, so live classes, so students will still start their day with advisory with their homeroom teacher. And then students will be transitioning between synchronous, meaning in-person, meaning live classes on Zoom or on the computer, and asynchronous, meaning they're completing work independently during that time. You'll also see on this schedule that older students have breaks and flex time built in, really just to make sure they're managing their time well, and also managing the amount of time that they're spending in front of screens. You'll see here, there are opportunities for independent work embedded in a lot of the asynchronous work. And again, that's just really important to make sure that we're setting up our middle schoolers to make really smart choices and manage their independent work time. So with that, I'm going to transition back to Emily Fernandez to take us through the fully remote learning option.
And Emily, before you share, John mentioned this, and I do want to highlight an exception for our kindergarten students, and I wanted to wait until the end. This is something that we've really worked hard on and is something that we're really, really excited about. We have really been carefully planning, and we are now able to confirm that every kindergarten student whose family wants them to attend a full week of 4 days of school will be able to do so. And by maximizing our building space and hiring additional staff, we've been able to shift from 2 socially distant sections to 4. Thus allowing our kindergarten to be present in the building each day, that we have live and in-person instruction. And this is something we wish we could do. We wish we had a giant building and we could do it for all grades. But when we thought about our kindergartners who are starting school, starting learning Hebrew, starting learning to read, starting to learn math in a unique and different way, we really felt that this was something that we wanted to invest in our kiddos and support them. So I wanted to highlight that. So Emily, I apologize for stealing your thunder there a little bit, but I thought that was really important, and it's something that we're excited to share as well. So Emily, I will pass it back over to you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, this was a hope of ours late in the spring, that we would be able to offer more in-person days as we started to conceptualize this for our youngest kids, and to be able to actualize it in Harlem is a great a great opportunity for our school and for our kids and for our families who are able to send their kids in and want them to. So I want to talk about the other option here. And this goes to the form that was shared in the memo yesterday that John referenced in the beginning of having to choose between two options. A hybrid option where you're in school some days and out of school some days, or a fully remote learning option where you are at home the entire week. Your children are at home the entire week. So you have the graphic here. I want to talk about a few things. Students whose families choose the fully remote model are going to be part of effectively two cohorts. They're going to be part of a cohort at their school with their school-based teachers. So you will be a part of a cohort with your Harlem Hebrew family, peers, and teachers. And so on the remote days, right? So if we're thinking about cohort A, who's in school Monday, Tuesday, on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you will follow the remote learning schedule. Your student will follow that for cohort A with instruction from a Harlem Hebrew teacher, with a morning meeting from a Harlem Hebrew teacher, with a follow-up from a Harlem Hebrew teacher, a full connection to your school community. On the live instruction days, where hybrid students are coming into the school building, a student who is fully remote will also receive live instruction, but they will receive it at home via Zoom. A full chunk of live instruction, we'll look at the actual schedule in a moment. The live instruction will be provided by a network remote academy teacher. So what this means is our teachers, we are having a segment of teachers providing strictly remote instruction to our fully 100% remote academy students on live instruction days. Monday, Tuesday, you'll get an instruction in ELA and math and core content here from your network remote academy teacher. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you'll get instruction, connection, community from your Harlem Hebrew teachers. For example, if I am a first grade teacher, we'll go into exactly what this looks like. You're fine, let's keep it on the next slide. If I am a first grade teacher and I am the first grade remote academy teacher, I will be providing instruction to students in a cohort from across all of our 3 New York schools to give them live instruction on those live instruction days. So it's actually a relatively unique opportunity for our kids to be involved in both their school community, but also a cross-network community. But you know, there are some either charter networks or, from my understanding of certain aspects of the DOE plan, where kids who choose to, families who choose for their students to be 100% remote are not receiving any instruction from their school-based teachers and not having any connection with the teachers and families and students from their school. That was not something we felt comfortable moving forward with. We know how important community is and how that is actually what like holds us together and builds us forward. And so we designed this model where live instruction is from a network academy teacher, remote academy teacher, and 3 days of remote is tied back to your home school. Morning meeting, Hebrew instruction is from your home school, and asynchronous assignments as well. A little bit about what this looks like. Again, we have this in bullet form here. 2 days of live instruction in core content in English language arts. Thank you, John, for the acronym translation there. And math from network remote academy days, the same days that our hybrid students are getting live instruction in the building, because obviously our Hebrew teachers, our Harlem Hebrew teachers would not be able to do live instruction in the building and remote at the same time. And then 3 days of both synchronous and asynchronous instruction from Harlem Hebrew teachers specifically. All of our content for remote instruction is going to be fully aligned with our in-person curricula. And so if or when families choose to opt into hybrid and leave the fully remote, we want to make that transition as seamless as possible, so it doesn't feel jarring in any way, which is another reason why we have students assigned to a cohort at their own school, so that ideally they can move into that cohort. And certainly, no matter what, they can work with the same kids and families across that grade in that school. Special education and multi-language learning is going to be key again. And again, technology and internet access, certainly for our fully remote students, is going to be critical.
All right, thank you, Emily, for that really great overview. I am going to talk to us a little bit more in detail about what this looks like in the day-to-day life. And so, I want to just reiterate again, our fully remote students are really benefiting from being part of two different communities, their school-specific cohort and the one across the network. So on the days that their school cohort is in the building for live instruction, the remote only students will join their counterparts from across the network to form another cohort in the remote academy. On these days, the students will have live instruction by a network remote academy teacher specifically assigned to their group, along with asynchronous independent work. Again, I do want to point out the alignment in content and curriculum. We are really, really committed to ensuring that our students who are part of a remote academy have a rigorous, engaging, and aligned academic program that will support them with reintegrating into our hybrid model at some point, and in the long term, being very, very successful in normal school, which we hope to someday return to again. So I want to just also share what this looks like on the 3 remote days that student school-based cohort is learning remotely. Our remote-only students will join and follow the same schedule. So for example, Emily Fernandez pointed out earlier, in cohort A, they are in the building on Monday and Tuesday. So if a hybrid, or if a student who is remote only is partnered with cohort A, on Monday and Tuesday, they will be with their remote academy teachers. And then on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, when cohort A is in remote learning, the remote learning students will be joining with cohort A at Harlem Hebrew. Again, this is the same schedule that their counterparts from their school will follow on the days that they are remote. And as Emily noted earlier, the Wednesday schedule is going to be slightly different and will be shared prior to the school year starting. And so I'm going to pass it over to Stephanie to talk a little bit more about what this looks like for our middle school students who are fully remote.
Great, thank you, Emily. So the middle school schedule for the remote academy, similar to the lower school, combines the live instruction led by a network teacher that's assigned to each group of students across the network. And there's also opportunities for targeted independent work. You'll also notice that there are deliberate breaks that are built into the schedule as well. We think that's really important, again, so that middle schoolers are able to manage their own time. And we also think it's just a really important skill that we need to teach our middle schoolers. You'll also notice that the middle school students who are in the remote academy will build relationships with 2 cohorts of students, which is a really nice bonus. So they'll have their school-based group, their school-based friends, and now that they're part of this remote academy, they'll also be able to build some really great relationships with with students across the network, which is really exciting. What you'll see on this next slide is the remote full day schedule. Similar to the elementary age school students, our middle school students will begin in the morning with their advisory, with their Harlem Hebrew advisory group. And then they'll transition through the rest of their day in the same way that their other peers who are also working remotely are doing as well. I want to name that we learned a lot of lessons in the spring, and really learned that having that advisory, having that touch point with teachers is really, really important, especially for our middle schoolers, especially as we're teaching them those executive functioning skills and time management. And that's why this is something that's slightly different from what we had in remote in the spring. We wanted to make sure that all students start the day with that advisory, where teachers will not only go through, a normal advisory routine and activity, but also where we'll explicitly name what are the activities, what are the assignments that students need to complete during the school day, so that students also hear it from their teachers, in addition to seeing it on the various platforms. You'll also see here that there are more opportunities for independent or asynchronous work. And you'll see as well that there are breaks and other opportunities for students to have independent work time. All right, and I'll now pass it back to Emily Fernandez.
Okay, so I just want to emphasize this again. We are reopening with a hybrid model where families can either opt into this hybrid in-person and remote structure, or opt into a fully remote model. And we commit to providing engaging, rigorous, and aligned programming across both of those. If you want to opt into our fully remote learning option, you will have the opportunity to change that selection per quarter. And John's going to speak a little bit more about how exactly that will work later on in the presentation. Do want to just note again that all of this will be integrated and aligned. And so as families either choose to or have to transition between the two models, we're really going to work to make them speak to each other and make the transition for families and students as seamless as possible. A couple of key dates here for upcoming information. On the 14th, we will be sharing out to families our school year calendar. On the 17th, we are asking that your submissions regarding hybrid or fully remote are submitted via the form. On the 31st of August, and I have this highlighted because this is an adjustment even from yesterday, we had hoped to be sharing out cohort assignments as early as August 24th. So if you opted into hybrid learning, you would know which 2 days your students would be in the building. Given what we're seeing in terms of responses and needing to manage the logistics of getting those cohorts set up, we are going to be sharing out those cohort assignments on August 31st. So on August 31st, I, as a parent, will get a notification of whether or not, if I chose in-person hybrid, which days my kid will be in school. Will my student be in school on Monday, Tuesday, or will my student be in the school building Thursday, Friday? And I'll get that on August 31st. September 8th, first day of school, very exciting. And as John noted in the beginning, those first 2 weeks, September 8th through the 18th, are 100% virtual for all students. We are starting virtual for all students so that we can teach and reteach the procedures that we need to for in-person learning, and so that we can build the fluency with our remote platforms, right? We're going to use those 2 weeks to make sure that all kids and families know how to access all of our remote applications: Seesaw, Google Classroom, Zern, Amplify, all of these aspects, so that once we move into the hybrid model, we can focus on instruction and we have those structures set up to start the year. First day of in-person school will be 2 weeks after that. All right, John. Oh, we're going to turn it over to our head of school for a brief statement to health and safety.
Yes, Emily, thank you so much. I want to highlight that our key priority is the health and safety of our students, our families, and of course our staff as well. And, to be honest, this is something the leadership team has been thinking about and agonizing over all summer, because we want to be in school and we want to be learning and we want to be having fun, but health and safety is absolutely foundational to all of that. And it is not lost on our leadership team. It is not lost on our teachers. And it is not lost on me that for our families who are choosing to send their students to school in the hybrid model, you are trusting your children and their health and safety to us. And I recognize that, and it is an honor, it is a privilege, and it is one that our school will absolutely do everything we can and work alongside you and partner alongside you to ensure that we are making sure our students are safe and healthy so that they can do the fun and amazing learning and thriving at Harlem Hebrew. And so I really wanted to highlight that. And I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan Worley, our Chief Operating Officer for all of Hebrew Public, and he's going to do a deeper dive into the specifics of our health and safety plan, since he and his team have really been leading our planning in this department over the past 5 months. So Jonathan, thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. So health and safety, as Emily mentioned, the health and safety of our staff and of our students is our absolute top priority this year. I can say that I am personally committed. Our operations team, both at the network level and at the school levels, and as Emily mentioned, our leadership teams really are committed to making sure that we are reopening our school with the best possible practices in place to ensure that we have the safest school environment that we can. We have been, as Emily said, we've spent the last 5 months really carefully monitoring and following federal, state, local guidelines, including information coming out of the CDC, Departments of Health, the local Department of Education, and we're reviewing best research, best practices, and listening to the needs of staff and families as we do our planning. So to that end, we have been framing our thinking around health and safety around a set of what we're calling our guiding principles. Everything that we're doing is based on these kind of foundational pillars, let's say. I'll go over them really quickly right now at a high level, and then I'm going to jump into a little bit more detail of some of the highlights of this work. We don't have time to go into everything that we're planning and all the details, but I'm going to try to give a good overview. So first is social distancing. That's something that we're all probably familiar with, going to the grocery store or anything outside the house. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're going to be employing that. Use of personal protective equipment, or PPE, things like masks and gloves. Health screenings, particularly obviously focused on COVID-19 symptoms. Cleaning and disinfection of the school. Environmental management, which is really going to be focused on air, ventilation, sanitation, airflow. And batching is another, and I'm not going to speak too much about batching because we already talked a little bit about batching our pods. Emily Fernandez spoke a bit about that already. All right, so we can move on to the next slide. Just to dive in again to some of the highlights of how we're going to kind of employ those guiding principles when we open schools. So first of all, social distancing. Again, this is something that should be familiar to most folks. We are going to be requiring 6 foot of separation at all times. That means in hallways, it means in front of the school, it means in classrooms. And we'll be specifically setting up our classrooms to satisfy that. Desks will be separated at 6 feet. The teacher will have space to move around that will be separating themselves from teachers by 6 feet. We will also be structuring a lot of our transitions like arrival and dismissal to allow for social distancing. This will probably mean some staggering of dismissal and arrival, just to ensure that we are not flooding the hallways all at the same time with kids. It will obviously also be really helpful that we're not having the full population of the school in at the same time. So on top of staggering, we have a lower population, which should allow us to manage that. And of course, we're going to be plastering the school with signage. We'll have posters up, we'll have stickers on the floor, reminding staff and students to maintain social distancing, showing pathways that are one way so we don't cross each other in the hallways, and reminding what is 6 feet, things like that. Moving on to PPE, or personal protective equipment. This is really one of the most important policies that we're putting in place, and that is that everyone in the building is expected to wear face masks at all times. And that means students, staff, vendors, visitors, families, anyone who sets foot in the building is going to be expected to wear masks. General expectation is that folks will show up with masks and wear them, but our offices will have extra PPE inventory on hand, and we will be able to provide disposable masks to students and to adults as necessary. In addition, we are going to have what we're referring to as hygiene kits in every room in the building. This is going to provide, like in the classroom, teachers will have sanitation equipment like wipes and gloves, other extra kind of hygiene focused equipment, and those will be stocked constantly. So they'll be on hand in the classroom. And then finally, we are going to have hand sanitizing stations set up, excuse me, throughout the entire building, and particularly focused on kind of transition points. So at the entrance to the building, at the entrance to the bathroom, and in every classroom by the doorway. And we are going to be maintaining a policy of requiring hand sanitation for staff and students as they enter the building, as they enter and exit individual rooms. This will be made easier because we are going to be concentrating most of the day in a single room, but as they leave the building, as they go to the bathroom, the requirement will be there. Screening is another initiative that we're going to be putting in place, and we are kind of taking a three-tiered approach to screening. And when I refer to screening, I'm talking about screening for symptoms, potential symptoms, particularly for COVID-19. Our first phase of that is testing for COVID-19, and we are going to be requiring all staff in the building to be tested for COVID-19 prior to our first day of instruction. The goal of that is to have results as soon as we can, and have those results for when students are in the building. We are not going to have the same requirement of students. It will be just for staff. The next kind of like level of screening is we are going to have, I think this was Emily Carson referred to this earlier, we're going to have a daily screening survey. We are working on a tool right now to make this as easy as possible for parents, and we'll release information about that as soon as it's settled. But the idea is all staff and all students or parents or guardians will have to fill out a very simple form daily in the morning prior to arriving at school. It's going to be ideally phone-based. You can do it quickly. It's a screening for symptoms. It's a screening for exposure. And it's just kind of noting, answering yes, no questions for the most part. Based on those results, if there's been potential exposure, if there are certain symptoms, the system itself may say, we are recommending that you don't come into school today. And then finally, the next level of screening on the ground that was also mentioned earlier, we will be doing no contact temperature checks of everyone who enters the building, students, staff, vendors, visitors of any kind. And it's going to be, we'll be able to do that with no touch. We will have a sufficient number of thermometers on hand, and that's going to be quick and easy as adults enter, and for students either on entry or in the classroom. Another one of our guiding principles here is intensive cleaning. So we are going to approach cleaning very seriously this year. While we will have staff in the building, cleaning staff in the building, as we did during the day last year, we are renewing our focus on cleaning high-touch, high-traffic areas, and with an added focus on disinfection. We have also purchased equipment that allows us to do deep disinfection on a nightly basis, and we're increasing our night staff so we can make sure that every classroom and every surface has been disinfected every night. So students can arrive the next morning secure that this room has been cleaned. We'll be able to do that with even more attention on Wednesdays when there's no students in the building. And then staff and students in the hygiene kits will have cleaning supplies. We will ask staff and students to participate in making sure that surfaces are clean, particularly after like lunch and things like that. And finally, environmental management. So one of the most important things that we are trying to do is focus on air quality, air ventilation, air sanitation. And so the first level of attacking this, we had an engineer come into our building and do a review of our HVAC systems, of the air quality, and we're going to be making adjustments to our existing systems, making sure we have sufficient external air coming in, making sure we are setting the correct humidity levels, all these things that help prevent virus spread. To the extent that we have any locations in our school where the HVAC may be insufficient at the moment, we are working on repairs, but we are also bringing in supplemental units to ensure that, one, we'll have good cooling, and two, we'll have good airflow in those spaces. In addition, we are looking into purchasing air sanitation equipment or supplements to our existing systems. So it's not just going to be focusing on airflow, but hopefully on cleaning the air as well. We're looking into the feasibility of that as we speak, and we hope to be able to update everyone on that soon. And then finally, just for best practice, we're going to ask everyone to leave windows open whenever possible. Leaving windows open is one of the most effective things we can do to ensure that there's airflow, that there's air moving in and out. And so unless there's real extreme weather, we're going to ask that teachers have their windows open in their classrooms to make sure that the air is flowing in those spaces. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. So I also want to just address kind of one of the questions that has been coming up the most and is surely on everyone's mind. So what's going to happen if someone in the school community tests positive? So the answer to that is this. In the event that someone in the school notifies us that they have tested positive, be it a student or a staff member, we are going to follow the required protocols as outlined by our state and local health departments. So at this time, right now, these are evolving. We get new information all the time on how exactly, what the planning is for this. But the first phase on this is always that we have to immediately notify the City Department of Health, and they will give us our initial guidance on what to do next. Based on the current best information, that could include temporarily shifting some of our hybrid students to a remote learning scenario for a given period. It could mean shifting an entire classroom to a remote learning period, and in a more serious situation, it could mean shifting the entire school to a remote learning situation. We of course are going to communicate appropriately what we can with the rest of the community, and certainly if someone's classroom is being asked to shift remotely, we will provide as much information as we can while maintaining confidentiality that we have to maintain. But that is generally going to be our approach, which in a nutshell is we are going to comply with what is expected of us by state departments, health departments. So with that, I think I'm going to be shifting it back over to John Rosenberg.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it. Folks, I'm mindful of the time. It's 8:56, and we still have slides to get through, including some that will hopefully answer some of your additional questions. I want to invite those of you who are able to stay on longer if you're up for it. We're going to, those of us who are presenting tonight will extend this call past 9 o'clock so that we can deliver as much of the information as we want to get into your hands and as we know you're all hoping for. I also want to acknowledge that this is like a lot to take in, right? The details of schedules, the details of health and safety plans. We're not trying to overwhelm you with it. We do feel an obligation for you to understand everything that we're doing at this moment in time, given how unusual, right, and challenging this moment is. And we want you to be able to make the best choice for your family about hybrid versus remote. And so I apologize for the volume of the information and kind of how hard it is to take in, but again, you have it in writing as well in last night's memo. I want to reiterate before we continue with tonight's presentation that you can reach out to us at any time at info@hebrewpublic.org, and we will get back to you, and we'll be getting additional updates as we learn more information. So a couple of quick notes on what comes next. Again, I want to reiterate, please make your selection by Monday, August 17th. If you choose the hybrid model and for some reason it's not working out for your family or your child, you can switch to fully remote. There'll be a little bit of lag time to ensure full alignment of your child with the remote learning academy that they'll be in 2 days a week, but you can make that switch. We cannot switch you the other way during the first marking quarter. All right, it is too complicated in terms of balancing for safety purposes, for cohort planning, for special education services, and all of the other intricate things that go into this. So if you do opt for fully remote, we need you to stick with that choice for the first marking quarter, which roughly goes through mid-November. One of the things that we know, and I've seen the questions come in on chat about this, around bus service, is that for many of our families, the choice of hybrid or remote may hinge on bus transportation. So I do want to speak to that briefly before we hit the 9 o'clock mark, even though we'll continue, because I know it's a huge issue for folks. This is one of the areas where New York City the New York City Department of Education and the Office of Pupil Transportation have given very little information to anyone, including us. The most recent reports on this from the city, from news articles, is that the city intends to provide bus service, but it doesn't know if it'll be able to provide it to everyone. It doesn't know when they will be able to provide it. They do know that there will be social distancing on the buses. The city is encouraging families who normally take buses to look at other options. They listed cycling and walking and, driving in a car. So for us, we're going to do our best to get answers from the Office of Pupil Transportation for our Manhattan-based families who would normally take the bus. We're also, for the last year, we've been providing transportation by bus for some of our Bronx families who need it, and we're working with that private bus vendor right now on the details of socially distanced busing and transportation routes and the like. What this means, in terms of advice for you, if you want hybrid for your child, if there's busing, I would encourage you to sign up for hybrid, and you can always switch to remote if bus service from the city ends up not working out for some reason. We also believe that the city will be providing Metro cards to families in situations where they're not able to provide bus transportation. We know that that's not going to solve the problem for everyone, but we did want to share with you the full extent of what we know about that at this time. The other issue that I want to speak briefly about, because it is very much on a lot of families' minds, we're seeing as we get the initial responses in from the form, we already have about 350 from families across our 3 New York City schools, is around school-age childcare. And the city made an announcement that about 3 weeks ago, that it intends to provide 100,000 free childcare slots to families who need school-age childcare on the days when their children are not physically in a school building. As with busing, we have no details yet. The city has provided no details about when that will launch, whether they will meet that 100,000 student goal, where those programs might be located, or anything, frankly. And so we're hopeful the city does it. And as soon as we learn additional information about it, we will pass it on to you so that your families, if eligible, can be in line for those kinds of programs. But we're not waiting on the city to solve this problem. We're also working with Kids in the Game, Kings, as some of you may know them, who were an after-school provider for our school last year and who will be working with us to set up a school-age childcare program at the church building, which is now a community usage building that is just around the corner from our school on 118th Street. This will not be a free program. This will be a fee-based program, but we're also trying to raise money, and have already raised some, to support scholarships for families that have really significant financial need in terms of sending their children to a program like that. We're also in touch with the Police Athletic League and with the Children's Aid Society through their Dunleavy-Milbank Center to see if we can develop similar relationships. Therefore, in the form, you will see that you can check a box saying, yes, I need help with childcare on the days when my child is not in school, and that will tell us that we need to be in touch with you as we develop details about programs that we can connect your family with. Next slide, please. So I want to emphasize again, as much as I hate to speak from a position of uncertainty, that as Jonathan noted, if a student or staff at Harlem Hebrew tests positive for COVID-19, at a minimum, that is likely to require a partial closure, meaning that some students and staff would have to self-quarantine for a period of time. And if we have something like an outbreak in the school, we may have to close the entire school for a period of time. And finally, that the broader New York context, if the positive test rate exceeds either 3% based on what the mayor has said or 5% based on what the governor has said, all schools in the city will close. So those are things that we have no control over beyond all of the health and safety measures we're taking. Nothing is foolproof, and we're living in a time of uncertainty, and we're going to do our absolute best. But the broader landscape around us we can't control, including what children and families and household members do when they're not in our school building. And then finally, of course, eventually we're going to have good news. Eventually there will be a vaccine. Eventually the virus will subside. This is not a permanent situation. And while we don't know when it will change, it will change for the better, and we will get back to business as normal. Emily, back to you.
Okay, so we have covered a lot of information up until now, and we understand if some of you are not able to stay on with us, we will be sharing a recording of this as well as these materials for your reference. But right now we're going to run through a few of the questions we have received via email or in one-on-one conversation to try to get some answers out to folks, even if there's questions coming after this session. Next slide, please. Just as a note, again, folks have been using the chat function to submit questions, and any questions that we don't answer in this session, we will follow up with either through individual email or through a collective follow-up memo to all families. So this goes to our Chief Operating Officer, COO's slides around health and safety. How do we plan on keeping students and staff safe and well? Jonathan?
Yes, thanks, Emily. So just kind of to refer back to a little bit of what I said before, we are prioritizing health and safety. It is one of the most important bits of planning we're doing this summer. So as mentioned, we're kind of focusing around the main guiding principles here of social distancing, mandating PPE, particularly mask wearing, screening all individuals in the building for health, temperature, things like that, intensive cleaning and disinfection, and air quality or environmental management or air ventilation. We are focusing on all of those things to try to help keep our students and our staff as safe as possible.
Thank you. And I would just echo Miss Emily Carson's sentiments that she shared about our concern for the safety of children, of staff, of our families, of our larger community, that this, our mission is robust in many ways, but right now safety and health is the priority, even as we go down this path of a partial reopening. Next. So in terms of number of children or adults in the building or classroom, we mentioned this earlier, but we are reducing our ratio. This is what the hybrid model allows so that we can maintain social distancing at all times. In the classroom, spacing our desks out, independent desks that are spaced, and in the hallways, in arrival and dismissal. So that will vary based on individual classroom. Our smaller classrooms might only have capacity to serve 8 or 9 students safely, and our larger classrooms could serve up to 15. Certainly less than 50%. The only other thing I'll note on this slide before we move on is that we are not going to be having numerous adults in and out of students' classrooms throughout the day. The adults who will be in a classroom will be the adults tied to that classroom. So they're individual teachers and the school leadership that support those teachers or students. So we're going to talk a bit about student culture in a moment, and the dean of culture assigned to a given set of classrooms will push in to support that classroom. But we are not going to have every adult in the building. We are trying to maintain as much social distancing and potting within our adult population as well. And so a first grade teacher is not going to be popping into a 6th grade class to visit former students or teacher colleagues. As sad as that is, we're really going to work to separate that and minimize adult contact with students. So this has been a big question. I answered with my parent voice to a question in the chat, and I'm going to start this, but then I also want to share it with Miss Emily, our head of school, just to note her take on this as well. We know that that these routines are crucial to existing in this environment in schools. And so mask wearing, social distancing, independent supply usage, right? We're not going to be all grabbing from the same crayon jar. We're going to have independent supplies. Absolutely has to be maintained. We also know that kids are adaptable, and that if we teach, model, reteach, invest, and coach and provide logical consequences where appropriate, and really work with our kids as learners, they will adopt this. And as I shared with a question in the chat, my 4-year-old son really wasn't used to wearing masks for more than 20 minutes. He was enrolled, we enrolled him in a day camp in the past 2 weeks, and we have to remind him to take it off at the end of the day. And he is an energetic little munchkin. If any of you were here for the last town hall, he made an appearance after bedtime, but he is able to adapt within, I would say, about a day and a half. It became pretty second nature to him. And I believe that our Harlem Hebrew teachers are better than the lovely camp counselors at my son's camp. It will take a lot of training, intentional work, and consistent monitoring across the whole school building. The second part of this is we're going to partner heavily with families. So we need each of you to understand that if you opt into our hybrid model, you're not opting into a normal school environment. It is different. Arrival is going to be longer, dismissal is going to be longer, and your child must wear a mask, among other things. And so we know that families who opt into hybrid are going to be willing to commit to that, and we're going to lean on that commitment to make sure that we are able to maintain the safety of all kids.
Thank you, Emily, for highlighting that. I would just also add, at the core of every adult in our building, we are teachers and we love teaching. And while we don't necessarily love having to teach wearing a mask and some of the other social distancing protocols, we will do that with love. And our teachers are phenomenal and amazing and such hard workers. And our teachers are actually starting back tomorrow, which is 3.5 weeks before kiddos come in. And they are going to be hard at work preparing and practicing to make sure that not only are we teaching kids with love around these procedures, but we are doing this and supporting kiddos in a differentiated way to ensure that every single child is successful. And like Emily said, we will partner with you, and we are going to be sort of over communicating with sharing, this is what we taught in school today, this is what we worked on. And typically a lot of those things that we're sharing is about reading skills or some of the like development. And it's going to feel new and a little different that we also talk about some of these social distancing things with you pretty openly and actively. And we also really encourage you to come to us as well. This is a new era for all of us, and we want to work together. And Emily, I'll pass it back over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. We are in this together, and we will be successful together. So what will behavioral and cultural support look like for students? One thing I'll just highlight here is, we are grounding our thinking and our work on this topic in trauma responsive practices, being aware that our kids and families, all of us, our staff, have really experienced collective trauma in these past couple of months. And that is, has real effects that we want to mitigate for children, that we want to support staff in being aware of for themselves. We're pairing that with a responsive classroom as we have operated before, but we've been enhancing our training for that. I just met this afternoon with a set of facilitators that's going to do a deep dive of concrete scenario practice for teachers in about a week and a half of how to apply student culture, student behavior strategies from responsive classroom to real life challenges that we predict in this new world. So a bulk of this time period of these 3.5 weeks Emily mentioned, prior to kids joining walking in our virtual doors on September 8th, is going to make sure we are prepared to set up and maintain the student culture we need. We will, of course, also have a full culture support team at each school. And of course, at Harlem Hebrew, we have our wonderful deans and social workers, and we feel quite confident in their love, commitment, and skill in working with each of our students.
Yeah, and I would just add there, Emily, in addition to all of the work that we're doing around trauma responsive practices and learning and developing our own skills there as adults in the building, we also know there are so many things that make school fun. Dress down days, book character day, some of our very special Harlem Hebrew traditions and things that bring us together as a community. those things are still going to happen, and maybe it will look a little different. Maybe book character day will have to happen twice, so that kiddos can come into the building and everybody has an opportunity. But our leadership team has not forgotten about those fun and wonderful things, and has put a lot of time into that this summer, because it is important that our kids have a lot of joy in learning, especially in this different time.
I so appreciate that. And I'm so grateful that you are our head of school there and keeping joy and fun a present priority, even as we manage these extremely high stakes planning and decisions for families as well. So live instruction during remote days. We've heard from families that they appreciated the significant live instruction in the spring and would have wanted more on remote days. We simply do not have enough staff to run a full live instruction remote while we are running a full live instruction in the building. And so we've had to make some choices here. And what we are grateful for is the fact that we've been able to plot in morning media advisory, so that any day your child is not in the building, they're starting with a morning media advisory, to both build connection, but also to preview their day and set them up for what their day is going to look like. We're also grateful to be having Hebrew on our remote days. And I want to take just a brief moment to speak to that. Our Hebrew instruction, as you may or may not be familiar with, has been is a core component to what we do. And in the past, it has looked like small groups that are leveled across a grade by student Hebrew proficiency. So students who are more fluent in Hebrew, being in a smaller group together, pulled from multiple sections, multiple homerooms, and students who are in the middle, pulled from multiple homerooms, 3 or 4, across a full grade, maybe even across 2, and students who are new and novice learning, being pulled across homerooms into a group that's targeted to their Hebrew level. We do not feel confident that this is a safe or prudent path given the risks that we're facing. If we were to do Hebrew in this model, in this hybrid model in person, we would be exposing kids and teachers to way more individuals than we are aiming for within our pod structure. So that, paired with some of the successes of our Hebrew programming this spring, has led us to having Hebrew on our remote days. So for the 3 days that our hybrid students are remote, and the 3 days that our fully remote students join a cohort, they will have Hebrew instruction by Harlem Hebrew teachers, targeted Hebrew instruction, live. We believe that this is going to be successful. We believe it is the most healthy and prudent way. We are sad that our kids and teachers are not going to be able to engage in Hebrew in person. And also, if you have gotten to see any of our Hebrew classes online, they're really quite wonderful. And the way they use music, any number of technologies, including Class Kick, to engage students, we do believe this is the right way to go. And Emily, I know that as a Hebrew learner yourself, this is a core passion of yours. So if you want to add anything else here,
Yeah, I would just say, Hebrew is a huge, important part of our curriculum. I cannot say that enough. And we want to really make sure that it shines and it lives, because it also is a place that brings us all a lot of joy. And so this is something that we're going to be thoughtful, and we're actually, Alona, many of you know Alona, our academic dean of Hebrew, and our Hebrew teachers. I started to have some conversations with folks that, this situation is actually going to force us to be creative about how we can make Hebrew live in our school. And so I'm excited for us to be forced to be creative, that we can carry on when school eventually does get back to normal.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay. So students and staff washing hands and hand sanitizing. We are going to encourage staff to wash their hands as much as possible, and certainly use hand sanitizer. There will be hand sanitizing stations in every classroom, and anytime an adult enters a classroom, for example, the protocol will be to sanitize your hands before you do whatever you are doing in the classroom. Sanitize your hands again before you leave. We are also going to have scheduled times throughout the day for teachers to do hand washing with their class, so that we can just maximize this. We know that this is crucial, and it's one of the key health and safety things that we can do to keep each other safe. Jonathan, our Chief Operating Officer, do you want to talk a little bit about disinfecting processes?
Yeah, sure. So we will be conducting disinfection every evening with specialized equipment and safe chemicals that will be able to disinfect all surfaces in all rooms. That is going to happen on a nightly basis. And we are going to be even more intensive about that on the day that there are no students there. So we will certainly be making sure that everything is clean and disinfected on a daily basis.
And we have learned some, I'll turn it back to you in a moment, Jonathan, but we have learned some fascinating things about the various ways you can disinfect, from the spraying functions to wipe downs, to do it in the most efficient way and disinfect consistently. So Jonathan, I know you touched briefly on air quality. Do you want to just follow up here?
Yes. So, the important factors with air quality are you want to be drawing as much outside air as possible. You want to have air moving through the building as much as possible, not recirculating from room to room as much as possible. And to the extent that you can, there are ways to actually sanitize the air too, with different systems. We're looking into all those systems for sanitation, and we are making sure that our existing HVAC systems are properly moving air. Another factor I think I mentioned is humidity levels. If you want a specific humidity level, which encourages or does the opposite of encouraging virus spread, it drops it. So all of those factors are in our engineering reports, so we can make adjustments to our existing systems with all of that in mind: the movement of air, the drawing of outside air, opening windows so we can do that in a non-mechanical way as well.
So Jonathan, I know you touched on this again earlier in the session. I think the headlines when I hear you or other operations staff talk about this is that we will immediately take the step to notify the Department of Health and follow all guidelines and directives from them. Do you want to add to that?
If we are notified of a COVID positive case, if someone gets sick in the classroom, just is showing symptoms, our protocols don't change very much. We're just going to be taking it as seriously as possible. So the student is displaying symptoms, they will be immediately referred to the nurse. If a teacher appears to be sick or is feeling sick in the classroom, they'll be sent home. We're just going to be a little bit more cautious than normal, but it's those same kind of guidelines that we've used in the past. But yes, if there's a positive COVID case, we are going to work directly with the Department of Health on next steps.
Great. So John Rosenberg, our CEO, touched on this briefly. John, do you want to just highlight any other things in terms of childcare for our families in need of it on the remote learning days?
Well, the one thing I'll note, just beyond what we've already talked about, just to reiterate, Kids in the Game, very close to having a finalized partnership with them for the church. We're hopeful the city will be able to launch its free spots, and we'll, of course, share information about that. And in addition to indicating that you need to be connected to childcare on the form that you all need to fill out by August 17th, also feel free to reach out to us directly with questions at info@Hebrew Public. We don't have as many answers yet on this as we'd like. We definitely will have some form of scholarship support. We don't know how much yet. And I also want to note, because I think it's relevant to the way we're trying to reopen here, that we are also trying to prioritize making those childcare slots that we're able to partner with available to the school-age children of our staff. Because part of enabling our staff to come in to serve your children is making sure that they have a place where their children can be. And in some cases, their children who are school age will be in schools that also are only in session 1 or 2 or 3 days a week. Again, please feel free to reach out to us with questions about childcare.
So we will be providing laptops. Jonathan Worley, do you want to just touch a bit on this?
Yeah. So we have a sufficient number of laptops, Chromebooks for most students, iPads for the younger students. We have an order in that is going to be arriving soon, and we're going to be setting those up to make sure it has all the proper security software on it. And we're working on a distribution plan as we speak. So we will be reaching out to families who don't currently have a laptop from the school to arrange for distribution. And for folks who do have it, we may need to take it back to make sure it's the right software. All of that will be communicated soon, and we'll have a whole system in place to make sure that distribution and return and redistribution will happen smoothly.
And Jonathan, I'll leave it with you for busing as well.
Sure, yeah, and as John mentioned, so we receive busing at Harlem Hebrew from OPT for our Manhattan-based students and from a private vendor for our Bronx-based students. As John said, we don't have information yet from OPT. We don't know what their bus routes are going to be. It's just a mystery to us at this moment. We expect to find out some information soon. We also expect if they aren't providing routes that they will hopefully be providing student Metro cards. But again, we don't have confirmation on that yet. There's no information out on the OPT routes. In parallel, we are working with our Bronx vendors, and we will hope to have an update shortly on whether busing will be available for our Bronx students.
Okay, so I touched on this briefly earlier in the session, but all curricula, all assessments and grading will be aligned to in-person. So we will be using both traditional forms of assessment, so written work products by individual students that they submit via Seesaw or Google Classroom will be a form of assessment that we use, and we'll also use more innovative forms. So online assessments, how do we engage students in assessing their learning through a platform as opposed to through a written piece of work that is submitted separately. But it will be very, very closely aligned to what our students are being graded on for in-person, and our planning for this, even our instructional planning that we've started as early as this past week. We just did a math unit unpacking, and that is relevant for both our hybrid students and for our fully remote students. And so there's going to be full alignment there. Students will be graded and assessed, and we're going to be pretty transparent with families in terms of sending home progress and where we're at with that. So arrival and dismissal, I touched on this briefly when we talked about how this is a different year, right? Students will wear masks, and we need families to be clear on that and committed to that if they're sending students in. Arrival and dismissal similarly will be different. It will be longer. We have to make sure that we are safely entering our kids into the building for kids, for staff, for family safety. All procedures and routines around health and safety are going to be reviewed with students and with families prior to the start of the school year in greater detail, be it the temperature checks that Jonathan mentioned earlier, or the health screening symptom form, that you have to simply answer, say, 3 questions or so prior to the morning about any symptoms. But we will have these structures in place, and it will take longer. Emily, I know that arrival and dismissal are key parts of your day in a regular school year. Do you want to speak to your thoughts about what this might look like and what we need from families as we move into this?
Yeah. So first of all, I want to just say thank you, because I think for those of you who are returning family members, you know that we worked really hard last year and actually made some changes in September with the partnership of our families to make sure that our arrival and dismissal were not only smooth, but safe. And at that time, we were not thinking about coronavirus. We were actually just thinking about how do we physically make sure all of our kids are safe and accounted for. And we had what I thought was a pretty good system, starting the day with, frankly, what was the highlight of my day, getting to hug and high five kids at the door, which unfortunately I have to miss out on and am quite sad about, and can't wait for the day where I can hug all the kids again. But a key part of our dismissal procedure was parents actually picking up kids from their classroom. And when that happened, it actually was a really great moment for families to see kids' classrooms and to have a touch point with the teacher. And it was actually, it turned out to be what was just dismissal, turned out to be a really special moment for a lot of our folks in our community. And I just, I want to say that that is something that we feel the loss of. And we appreciate your grace as we navigate this new system to ensure everybody's safety. And we are going to have a lot of clear communication about it in advance. We're going to have a lot of signage about it. And we're going to probably also have to remind families about things. And so when we have to say, no, you can't go up to the classroom, please know that we are also like really sad about that as well. And we can't wait for the day where we can really welcome everybody into the building and into the space again. And so we appreciate your grace. We appreciate your patience. While we loved dismissal and arrival, it was about 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon. And so we're really extending it for safety, and we appreciate what that means for families, particularly those who are working, what that means about a longer arrival and dismissal. And so we appreciate you working with us. Thank you.
All right, so we touched on this question earlier, and while it would be ideal if families were able to choose the days that our kids came into hybrid, be like, I can select Monday, Tuesday, or I can select Thursday, Friday for my student. And it would be ideal if families could choose morning or afternoon schedule for the fully remote option for that 3-hour chunk of live instruction in ELA and math. We are not going to be able to accommodate those requests. We have a number of moving pieces between number of families who are opting into fully remote, staff who are in the building versus staff we are going to assign remote, and working out the schedules for those two cohorts. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to accommodate family preference here. We will, as noted earlier, accommodate household placement. So if 2 students are from the same household, we will make sure that they are in school on the same day. So if I had a son and daughter who both attend Harlem Hebrew in 1st grade and 3rd grade, they would both be in the building on the same day, so that I, the parent, don't have to account for childcare all 5 days of the week. I know that these 2 days, both of my students are in the building. This we also talked about briefly. While we are accommodating families who choose hybrid in person, and for one reason or another, work, health, whatever it may be, feel the need to go back to fully remote, that switch to fully remote can happen at any point. If you choose to switch back to fully remote, you should expect some transition time, be it up to a week, where we are getting you into a remote cohort, etc. Although you will continue to have your remote learning days with your cohort. We cannot accommodate families opting into the in-building hybrid option, except for on a quarterly basis. Students, when they're in person, need to be very carefully assigned to classes and classrooms based on learning needs, staff requirements, and social distancing. And so we won't be able to simply opt in to in-building. If you want in-building, as John noted, you are going to need to request that in the form now. The next opportunity you'll have to do that will be for Q2, which will be towards the end of October, when we'll be sharing that out again. And again, this is all pending where we are at the beginning of October, at the end of September, in terms of how we're functioning. Are we still in this hybrid model, or have we shifted into a different structure? So this question, as we were preparing for it, just kind of tugs at my heartstrings. I was speaking with a colleague of mine who, runs a much smaller private school where their class size is already at about 12 students per class, and she is able to welcome all of her students into the building because they are already at that small of a class size and are able to socially distance. We are not able to offer that to all students. We are only able to offer that to about 1 grade. We identified kindergarten as the highest leverage grade, given that our kids are brand new to the building, aside from our small cohort of preschool families who are moving up with us to kindergarten. Also because there's been a good amount of study in the last 6 months on what learning progress has looked like during this time for kids in different age groups. And consistently across multiple studies, including NWA, which organizes MAP, one of our key assessments, it's clear that our kindergarten students lose the most by not being in person in terms of academic progress. And so for these 2 reasons, we chose to prioritize that grade. We wish we could have every kid in and at least offer this to all grades, but we're not able to. And it's a tough choice that we were faced with, and this is where we landed. Okay, Jonathan Worley, I'll ask you to tag back in for this one on visitors. We've kind of touched on it, but.
Yeah, so I totally understand the desire for folks to want to come in and see their child's school and want to be in the building. We are unfortunately going to be limiting access to the building for now, and it's unfortunately this is for everybody's safety. We want to make sure that we are really controlling how many people are in the building at any time. So we're going to limit the number of visitors to just coming into the office and lobby space only for critical issues, and we'll generally not be allowing visitors into the classrooms, as those are our pods or our batches. And when possible, we're actually going to ask folks who come to the building to wait outside if they're waiting for a student, or something like that. So unfortunately, we are going to be limiting that. We are going to be asking families to not come into the building unless there's an absolute requirement.
Yeah, and I wanted to step in and just say, I know that there is, potential tension between wanting to keep your children safe and visitors out, and also wanting to be able to visit your own child in school. And like Jonathan said, this is for everybody's safety. And as soon as it is safe for us to open our doors, I promise you, our doors are going to be wide open for all of our families to come in.
All right, so I'm going to hand it to John just to close out briefly, and then back to Emily. John, I'll give it to you.
Thank you, Emily Fernandez. Folks, I know it's 9:36, and most of you have stuck with us, so thank you. We're going to wrap in just another minute or two, and apologies for how long this has taken, but again, a lot of information to convey. Some of you may be part of our very small pre-kindergarten community, and I know we haven't addressed pre-K in our communication with you from last night, nor in our remarks so far today, and I want to apologize for that. The reason we haven't is that pre-kindergarten programs are run under a separate contracting branch of city government. And as little information as we've gotten from the city about things like transportation and childcare, we've gotten even less about pre-kindergarten. I can tell you that there was a webinar last Tuesday that our staff joined. Lots of other providers of pre-K were on the line. Lots of questions were asked, and very few answers were provided. If I had to guess, our best guess currently is that the pre-K program that we will be able to offer starting this fall will be very, very similar to the choices available to parents in grades 1 through 8. In other words, a choice between 2 days in person and 3 days remote, or fully remote. We'll have more information about that as soon as we know. And again, whether with those questions around pre-K or any other question, a lot of individual questions have come in on the chat. We've done our best to try to answer them in the chat or in the comments we've made tonight. Please email us directly. We encourage you to do that so that we can also try to address these individualized situations one-on-one as best we can. Emily, Carson, over to you.
Yeah, I just, thank you to everyone for being here, especially we did go over. You can still send questions to us. You can send questions at any time. Also, my email is on the school website, so please feel free to reach out. I love just talking to all of you, and I also live alone in Brooklyn, and so I love any communication, and I love the Harlem community, so would love to hear from any of you. And again, I cannot say thank you enough. I feel I obviously am quite biased, but I also feel like in this pandemic, we truly have such a beautiful community. We have such amazing teachers. We have such amazing family. We have such amazing staff. And I would not want to go through this experience with anyone else in the world. And so while I would rather not be going through this experience, I'm grateful to be doing this with all of you. And so thank you and good night. And please, again, reach out if you have any questions.
And a recording will be available. We will be sending out a link to the recording and the deck so that anybody who wants to share this with friends of yours from the school or members of your community who didn't get a chance to see it can do so. So thank you all, and good.